Okay, great. So welcome. You're going to be the third, I think, podcast with my new class. Everyone, this is Ellen Malvin McIntosh, which I can never spell. I'm going to have to make sure I spell it correctly when I post it. Is the C not capitalized?
Not capitalized. Nope.
Okay, that's why I always mess it up. And so let me just tell you the purpose of this series that I started. Um, the class is called Neurodivergence in Literature and Media, and it's kind of a new class, a new approach, and there's a new certificate going up in disability studies. The idea of this course was to take literature and film and sort of get a conversation going about representations of neurodivergence and people's experiences and points of view. I felt like just doing literature was a little bit outdated, and I wanted to update the course to also be kind of friendly to neurodivergent learning perspectives and methods. So that's why I wanted to do kind of multimedia approaches and podcasts. The students are actually going to do short reel responses to the material. So after
Mhm.
they listen to you, they're going to give a little TikTok style video about what they learned or what they were thinking about or what it made them think, in the world. And that way, I'm hoping like these new assessments are more in line with how students today think about processing information. And they can do it on the way to the train and kind of listen to us if they don't want to sit and look at us. So the
Sure.
idea is to not only be new at the topic, but to understand the consequences of the topic for kind of assessment and education. So that's kind of where
Sure,
we
I love
are.
that.
Yeah, it's super fun and new, and I'm trying to not bore everybody with lectures. Actually, during COVID is when I started doing conversations instead of lectures because I had to record lectures, and I felt so stupid talking to myself in my room all the time and recording lectures about literature that I started inviting people for conversation so it would be a little bit more organic and
Mm,
interesting.
yeah,
So it's just a friendly conversation. I did have questions in advance. One of the things I was going to invite you to do was to wear something or bring something that represented neurodivergence to you, whether it's your specific form of neurodivergence or whether it's just like the global idea of it. So,
sure.
yeah, is
Yeah.
that what the sweater
Well,
is?
I did. I never dress like this. I wear a lot of like monochromatic like colors, but I wore a bunch of
Oh,
different patterns, different colors.
look at
I feel like mentally I am very colorful and mismatched patterns, but I do not usually prefer to wear all this kind of like I don't wear a lot of mismatched patterns if I can help it. But
But that's how you
um
think about
yeah,
being
that was kind of symbolic
neurodivergent.
for me. But also what? Yeah, that's
That's
how
how
I
you
think of it.
think.
But
Yeah.
also I am out in the hammock for this interview, which is one of my favorite places to be, but it's also constant like movement, mostly for girls. It's a lot of fidgeting instead of like actively moving in ways that people can see a lot. But so just micro movements a lot, maybe.
Yeah, I interviewed another person with ADHD and female, and then we realized how kind of unusual that is because it's traditionally been males diagnosed with
Mm,
ADHD, and she wasn't diagnosed until her 30s.
same with
Um,
me.
oh, really? And she said it was such
Yep.
an
And
aha.
yeah, yeah.
But she said that it's easy to miss with female presentation because people are looking for the more male sort of outward form of
Yes.
ADHD, and for women it's a little bit more subtle, maybe.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm always fidgeting, but I don't it's not always very noticeable that I'm doing things like that to people. So I think males always get I mean it's not always, that's a generalization, but they really do get it's more noticeable in some of the kinds of energy that different people bring to ADHD, I suppose.
How do you think it manifests in female presentation? Is it just more subtle or is it just like differently focused?
I think it kind of seems like to other people it might present as being kind of absent-minded and forgetful and potentially maybe lazy or less motivated. But I don't think it's as easy to see because there's not usually quite as much of that high energy running around that you see as kind of a stereotype of ADHD.
Yeah, it almost sounds like they blame it on character
hmm And
more.
and I think ADHD is a complete misnomer anyway, because it is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and they added the hyperactivity, but I think if you're going to change the name, you should probably fix the attention part because it's not a lack of attention. It's not a deficit of attention. It's a difficulty in shifting attention where you want it to be in the moment. So I think what people often say is an ADHD superpower is hyperfocus, which I some days if I get into it, I can work for 14 hours straight and I barely notice that I'm working. I don't notice what I've eaten. I'm really in the zone. And I don't think that many people can do that, but like it's also not something you necessarily want to do, or you can get your attention shifted in the wrong direction. And your attention will bounce around until you land on the thing that will capture your attention. So,
It's interesting because when you talk about it, you say um, it's like your attention isn't going where you wanted. So there's like you froze. Are you okay? So it's like you are outside of the ADHD part of you. Is there like two of you?
uh, outside of it, um, no, I'm gonna go inside to make sure that my internet connection continues working. My outside of it. Uh,
Like, do you
I
feel like
I
you're
don't
directing
really
it?
think I don't really think so. I think it's just that I don't have it's executive functioning that is kind of difficult for people with ADHD. So I don't always get to choose, or it doesn't feel like I get to choose which direction that attention is going. So, I mean, it's
Hmm.
all me, but it's like uh maybe a bouncy ball that's bouncing around and then gets stuck in some mud or whatever and stays there. So then I'm stuck in that mud, like I'm
Right.
bouncing all over. Then I'm stationary, but I also have a lot of trouble pulling myself out of that stationary spot. So I, timers will go off to tell me to move on to something else and I ignore them. I just keep working on that thing that has captured my attention for extended periods.
And you
So
set the timers, so you're ignoring the part of
I,
you
I
that set the
barely
timer.
hear them. I barely hear them. And my brother, who also has been diagnosed with ADHD, says like his wife is a type A, and he was trying to get her to understand that he's not ignoring the basket of stuff he's supposed to put away. He stops seeing it. He actually doesn't see it. And she just doesn't get it, but I totally understood what he was saying because it's true. Things like sounds, alarms will become invisible or I won't hear them. Things that I don't want to pay attention to become totally invisible. So, and I
Right.
also have a hammock up in my office. So,
For motion.
yeah,
And I think I remember you had at one point you had a Stairmaster under your desk.
I still do. Yeah. And I love working on a moving like a treadmill desk. Um, so yeah, lots of that.
Can
That.
you I wanted you to tell the class a little bit about what you do for work
Oh, sure.
and also like you said you were diagnosed in your 30s. The story of that diagnosis, some people have a kind of coming out story or an aha moment where the rest of their existence became kind of explainable from a diagnosis. Some people didn't want the diagnosis, don't like the labels. Some people find them liberating.
Mm.
So there's that. And then, like, what do you do for work? And then, how does your ADHD impact your work? And how do you sort of manage that? It sounds like the language is interesting because it's you and not you. It sounds like it's something that crosses you, invades you, bounces through you. And you sort of are watching it and going with it, but also are you trying to control it or are you sort of allowing it to hyper focus you because that is a superpower?
Well, I don't know. It really, I don't feel like a lot of control over it generally, but I do know that, I mean, there are ways that I try to control it. So I'll try to make sure that when my Adderall kicks in, I am working on the thing I want to work on. Because if I'm not, if I start organizing when it kicks in, that's what I'll focus on. If I start, so it I try to direct that focus by, or if I'm not taking Adderall, just saying, well, the thing I'm going to work on first is this because I know this actually has to get done, because otherwise I'll just stick with the other thing all day. Um, what else did you ask? As far as work,
Yeah,
I
and tell the students what you do, and then like because part of what I want them to also see is that not only ways that you um, introspect and understand your capabilities, but then how you present yourself to the world, how you fulfill a role and negotiate between managing yourself and managing a world that may or may not accommodate you.
yeah. Um, yeah, so as far as like you mentioned the story of getting diagnosed, and I think I knew that I probably had what was back then ADD back in high school, but I went to the doctor to talk to him about it, and doctors just wouldn't get me tested. They assume, I think with girls especially, that it's anxiety and that it's not that you can't focus, it's that you're worrying so much that you're not focusing. And so doctors kept trying to put me on anxiety medication instead. And you learn coping mechanisms to get around like ways to, I just work a lot harder at studying. I just do a lot more work. And I think if one of our mutual friends was here, she probably would say, yeah, like in grad school we did. I often was kind of single-mindedly focusing on work, and it's because I have to put in more time, I feel like. Um, but I was had all of these coping mechanisms, but then um, by the time I was working on my PhD, I realized we're reading a book a week in every class, and I am not like paying enough attention. It's just a lot of material to try to consume and remember and absorb, at a time without help if that's something that's going on. And so I went and got that diagnosis. But really, I mean, the only tool that helps me coming out of that, I guess, is, you know, um, being more cognizant of strategies pertaining to that specifically, but also the Adderall, because I do not tell people that I work for that I have ADHD. I don't tell people I work with that I have it unless they have it too, because there are people in our office who do. Because I've realized that it never helps you. It's never helpful to me, at least. If I've told a boss or something, or someone I work with, one of two things happens. They either dismiss it as imaginary, that some people don't really see it as a real thing, or maybe three things, or they say, "Oh, I think I have that too," or they start treating me a lot differently and treat me kind of like an infant that needs babysitting all the time. And none of those things really do me any favors. It doesn't really help me with my work, I don't feel like. So I do not tell people um,
What if you got to tell them and also tell them what's helpful? Like,
Well, that that's a good point because that is how I and other people I know with ADHD handle it. Is instead of saying I have ADHD, I want you to be aware, you say this is how, my brain works. So if you send me the document in this way, or if you do it in this way, then I'll get it right away. But so focusing on how you operate rather than the deficit itself, you know?
right, right. And you said you have to work harder, like in graduate school or what have you. Is is it is that working harder because you can't control the attention as much, or is it working harder because you're processing more than most people? You're sort of not filtering out everything. Is it harder because it's overwhelming, or is it harder because you're not able to um, sort of distill the main ideas in the same way that maybe a neurotypical person would?
I think all of the above. I think when I was first describing it to during testing, when they did the ADHD testing, I was saying it feels kind of like you're walking through a fog. That's how you're thinking. Like it's always in a fog. So something will stand out to me because it's right in front of me, just like in a fog. Um, but other things, everything else is gone. So I will kind of, I have to when I'm thinking through different materials or things, I'll focus on one thing and I forget about other aspects of it. Um, yeah, it's just a lot more, reviewing those things and taking more time with them,
Mhm.
and accounting for the fact that if I go into hyperfocus and I stay there, I may not get to a bunch of other stuff. So I'm going to have to work harder because I worked too much on this one part,
Mhm.
and so I
Mhm.
have to spend more time working to get the rest of it done.
That's really interesting. I didn't know like about the hyper focus. It's almost the opposite of, so a lot of autistic people say that they have trouble filtering out the environment, that the
Mm.
environment is so loud. It's almost like they can't fog.
But there are very big differences in some people and how they experience it. And that might be because there is a lot of like cross diagnoses, like maybe people have different combinations of things going on, but I have talked to some people who say that they really can't, they can't have any noise, they can't have certain things going on. And I know I've been told it's more common for people with ADHD to have a sensitivity to one sense or another. And so I I really I guess I don't know that I want to say this on here, but like I wear once sweatpants get nubbly or like get what do you call that? When you wash them too many times, I have to wear them inside out because I can't have certain textures touching my skin. I
Oh,
don't know.
really?
But I have friends who have ADHD and sound is their thing. Like they just can't handle too much. I don't know. So I'm not sure if that's really, I start to think that sometimes um, it all has to be taken with a grain of salt because it starts to feel like they say everything comes with ADHD, like, oh, it's also emotional dysregulation, which I often think I have, or it's these sensory things, or it's so many different things. And I think, well, this just sounds like we're starting to blame it for all our problems. But
Which is part of the move to neurodivergence
mm,
is an umbrella. I was interviewing Cindy, our friend. I was telling the class that we're all very good friends, and Cindy and I were comparing it to first wave and second wave feminism. It's like first wave was kind of the Disabilities Act. Then the second
yeah.
wave is kind of this, it's almost like a holistic feminism. And we're probably going to find out that it's diluted and maybe homogenized the pool, and maybe we need to get back to some of
Yeah.
the, yeah, the communities that aren't really represented as effectively in neurodivergence. But at the same time, it's probably doing something really interesting. Cindy was talking about how the neurotypical population, it turns out, is probably pretty small, and the neurodivergent population is probably much larger.
Well,
So it's kind of shaking up our categories.
I mean, that makes sense. I don't think like that's all dependent on there being an actual normal. And I don't think that's true. I mean, sometimes I've had conversations with people with ADHD where we decide, if the world thought like we did, if the world was designed for us, we wouldn't seem weird at all, because it's
Right.
not, I don't feel like I have a disability. I don't usually think of it that way. I think I have always thought of it in terms of neurodivergence, even when that term didn't exist, because it doesn't really feel to me like, maybe it's because it's an invisible kind of thing. It's very easy just to see a person like me and think I'm just, kind of dotty, but, you know, so I don't see it that way, but
Well, one
I
of the things that we're doing in this class is looking historically too, like we're reading Anne of Green Gables, and
Mhm.
we're sort of mapping neurodivergence and the possibility of that onto her experience. And I don't know if you've read the novel, but she
Yeah.
has pages and pages and pages where there are no paragraph breaks, where she is
Yeah.
right, and her
Yeah.
imagination and her, but it also facilitates her registration of nature and animals and trees, and she has this kind of relationship to the world that can't really be interrupted. I think that's kind of the point of how her brain, her consciousness is so on display. So I was wanting to look at that and see how the students felt about mapping neurodivergence into history. I don't remember when we started using the term.
Mhm.
I don't know if you do. I and I've been wondering about this term. I'm like, when did we start using it? When did we start including dyslexia, Tourette syndrome, dysgraphia, all of these things into one big umbrella? And I don't remember when this came into vogue. Do you?
No, I feel like it seemed like it became more of a household term kind of after I got diagnosed. I don't feel like it was when I was younger. I don't remember anybody ever using that, really. I mean, maybe people did, but I wasn't aware of it until I was an adult, at least. So, yeah, I think
Right.
it's more, and it does seem more like a more accepting term, and yeah, more, accounting for that nuance. So I appreciate that.
I'm wondering though about, because you said that a lot of clinicians might point a woman who can't concentrate or who concentrates hypervigilantly might point you to anxiety
Mhm.
or maybe even OCD, which I think is an umbrella of anxiety. And the students are reading Turtles all the way down, which is an OCD perspective. So what
Mhm.
I'm wondering is there any way that you might want to comment to the class on sort of keeping a critical lens for sort of who counts for a disability or who doesn't count for a disability, but then also the politics of being absorbed into neurodivergence versus advocacy for ADHD, and what if the world was for ADHD? And it sounds like you have ADHD friends and that this is a topic of conversation that you really think about.
Okay, so where did you want me to start there? What was the first one that you mentioned?
Well, I guess the big thing was sort of what do you get out of relating to friends with ADHD and the specific kind of thing you want to look at versus being absorbed into neurodivergence, which is how you kind of thought about it. Um, what do you want the class to think about that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I I really do appreciate being able to like talk to friends who experience similar things because I think we all want community and we all want to find people who identify with our experience and it maybe makes us feel less strange or less alone. Um, as far as, yeah, neurodivergence and broadening it out, I don't even know. I guess like when you mention it that way, I don't know if I do kind of think of myself in that box a little bit, even though I appreciate the term. I don't necessarily, I mean, I think that the experiences are so vastly different across all of them and all the combinations that it can be helpful to create that kind of umbrella term because I think it reminds us, I don't know. I guess I'd say the term neurodivergence to me is like we're all neurodivergent. I don't, I do not think there is a normal. I think that's like, there were times when it wasn't okay to be gay or, and you might, all these terms that we have, it doesn't mean that it didn't exist before. It just means that we didn't accept it enough to label it in a very welcoming way. And I I don't know. I guess I don't necessarily identify with a lot of the different aspects of the full spectrum of neurodivergence, but I do think that we all fall into that category. It's just, you know, so I appreciate that about the term that it points out that yeah, we're different mentally. But I I do think that probably the people that you might think of as normal also fall in there somewhere.
Well, I guess the question becomes when you're talking with your ADHD specific group, do you guys feel that you need to understand yourselves better and approach things better? Or do you feel like the world needs to change and become a place for ADHD to thrive better? Or I guess you think of yourself as ADD.
Uh, I don't know. I don't think the term is a very good term, no matter if you put the H in there or not. But I okay, so
So does the world need to change, or do you guys feel like you guys
okay, yeah,
need
thank you.
to kind of work on yourselves or both?
Yeah, I think personally, I feel like I need to take responsibility for it because it's not, we all need to. You can't change other people. You can't change the world around you. You change what you can in your own space. And so I feel like, and I think it's interesting. I'm interested in um, kind of psychological things, and I like learning about how my brain works. And I do like learning new strategies. I like paying attention to ADHD strategies because I know that sometimes, you can wind up feeling defeated when you're trying to learn a strategy that everybody else swears by and it just won't work for me and I can't figure out why. And it's probably, I'm working against my brain and not with it. So, but
What
I don't think
strategies have worked?
I, um, I love gamifying things. I gamify everything. I, um, love like doing things for points or rewards or um, just even being able to check things off. I really, that kind of stuff is really motivating for me. But gamifying also in turning things into a competition or turning, anything like that is really helpful to me. But also breaking things into tiny little pieces that can be very helpful too, because I get pretty overwhelmed by the whole. It's hard for me to think about, you know, I I think about the pieces and the whole very separately, and so I have a lot of trouble trying to manage really big tasks unless I break them apart. But
Are there any assistive devices or technologies you have found really useful?
mhm. I do feel like um, uh, activating multiple senses is helpful. So I probably wasted way too much time in grad school scanning books because I would scan books, run OCR, and then I would read them while I was listening to them. In this really, back then they did not have very good automated voices, so it really annoying automated voices And I discovered like that really is helpful because I can hear it and read it at the same time. I'm activating more senses, and that's helpful. So I found, things that would read anything that was a PDF, really. Hmm.
And that's part of what my thinking is with podcasts, because people can transcribe it. They can watch
Hmm.
it if they need lip assistance.
Yeah.
Um, in COVID, when I taught with a mask, I noticed that even people whose hearing was perfectly normal still needed to see the lips sometimes for complex words. Sometimes students whose English was a second language still needed to see the lips, which I hadn't thought about. So this is part of that, and but they could also just listen to it walking if they wanted to. So the idea is to try to address, yeah, kind of various ways of processing information. I can't walk and listen to anything because I will stop
Mm.
listening. I will start looking at the leaves and the greenery, and just I can't. I'm not a
Hmm.
good multi-sensory person. Like if I look at the news and they have an image and they're talking and then they have a ticker tape, I just
Hmm.
can't. I can't do
Yeah.
that. So like, is that something that helps you? Is this kind of like multi-textual?
When it all matches up, I guess getting through my dissertation, I found it went a lot faster when I'd go on walks and I would like it might have looked like I was talking on the phone, which is otherwise I'd look crazy, but I would verbally draft it out and map it out. And so having even that sense of like talking and thinking through it or, talking while writing or whatever. But yeah, I think with like the ticker tape and stuff, that seems like a bunch of different information coming at you at once. I'm kind of talking about reinforcing
The one
the
thing.
language like in different ways, but it's still the same information. So I think I'd probably have trouble with that too. But
Yeah, but it sounds like you take the multimedia of the world's delivery of information and you make it your own
mhm,
coherent kind of thing.
yeah.
Um, so I try to keep these relatively manageable for the students, like, like 30, 40 minutes. So I should probably start bringing this to a close. But I wanted to know, just because I know that you are a parent, you have a daughter, um, how does the ADD or ADHD or whatever label, we hate that, so whatever you call it, I don't know if you named it. Cindy named her own disability, like her own thing. So, but if
Oh,
you sort of thought about how does it impact you as a parent, I kind of think there could be like positive and negatives in that. In
oh yeah.
some ways, it probably can limit, but in some ways, it probably makes you very receptive to some things in your daughter. So, can you talk that through a little?
Absolutely, because I do think people with ADHD tend to be really creative thinkers, creative brains. I I often come up with a lot of ideas at work that people haven't thought of. Um, but I do think I also haven't lost some of that. I don't know, being from childhood studies, I don't want to say like childlike thinking. I don't want to say it that way, but I feel like I haven't lost some of the creative thinking that some of us lose. And I really still enjoy a lot of the aspects of what is accepted in childhood. I like reading kids' books with her. I like Chris, my husband, like he would rather do a whole bunch of different things than read books with Maggie. I and play and do all this stuff. I really feel like I do embrace a lot of that. I think one thing I have to be really conscious of is that the hyper focus where she's concerned because I can on the one hand I can wind up spending too much time doing things with her and she's not maybe becoming independent enough because we're doing things together. She's not doing as much independent play. But then on the other hand, I sometimes dive into work and I can't climb out. So she'll be trying to get my attention and you know, 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes, and it turns into hours. And I barely notice that she wanted me. She has said before, like, are you going to disappear again? She actually said that a few months
Interesting.
ago because I was leaving for work before she got up and getting home after she went to sleep and working so much that she just felt like I disappeared. And so that's something I tried to be mindful of that that's not,
Right.
I can't do that. That's not good for her.
Is that so and is that similar to the other kinds of relationships?
Oh heck yes. I was telling you like I don't know. This some of this is 2%. I don't know how much you're gonna edit. But
Very
with
little.
with oh, with a mutual friend, I remember like thinking, I thought we were friends. And she told me at one point, I don't think we're really friends. We're like workmates because I never wanted to do anything that wasn't let's go work at a coffee shop. Let's go. And to her, that was not friendship. And to me, that was my way of making room for friendship
Uh-huh.
because I'm trying to keep up. And so I'm always working. And so yeah, I don't think at that time she understood that. And we've had discussions since then that, yeah, she just didn't understand how my brain worked and that was part of it. So I do think I can forget to check in with friendships too. And I don't
Yeah.
mean to. I just get hyper focused on something.
That's
So,
interesting because that's really just an interpretation that would have been a simple conversation.
yeah.
But because it's like there's expectations, social expectations, you're trying to manage a whole other set of expectations within yourself. So sometimes you bump up against a social expectation that's just like foreign or not at all what you were trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it is a simple conversation, but if you don't realize that you're both thinking so differently that, you're not even on the same plane. It's like, so you don't
Yeah.
realize you think somebody's neglecting something when they're really just, managing or thinking about it differently. So,
But you
so
you you said you mask sometimes. You don't always disclose. So I
right.
guess what I'm wondering is, do you feel like people with a neurodivergent element are constantly burdened with representing themselves to other people, or do you feel like they need to mask? Or is it like a choice? Like you can either represent yourself or you mask.
Um, I don't know. Like it all feels so risky. It's like sometimes it makes me want to over explain myself, like constantly explain, why I'm doing this, why I'm doing that, because I feel like a lot of times, and I think having the PhD makes it trickier too, because people have a whole different set of expectations of that. So they meet me and I don't that's another I don't tell people I have a PhD either. I almost never do. And I think that's because, again, same with ADHD, it comes with a set of expectations. And I don't, people will think of me like when I got to my job, I help researchers with their research. I do a lot of focus groups and things like that. And I feel like when I got there, they assumed I knew everything. That I walked in the door and they wanted me to run the place. They told me eventually we want you to take over. And they didn't even know me. And it was largely because they saw the PhD, and then, I feel like ultimately the ADHD expectations, like eventually I let people down. And then it's like this really hard fall from grace, and people expect much less of me. And I think it's much easier just to don't give them these high expectations. Don't give them these low expectations. Just be who I am. And,
Say
you
hi, I'm
know,
Ellen. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
that's
because
really
it's really
interesting.
hard.
A lot of people
Yeah.
like the labels because they found an aha thing, but in your case, you kind of always saw yourself as neurodivergent. You didn't need the word. And for you, these labels can actually be limiting. That's what I'm
They
kind of
can be,
hearing.
but they're also helpful for me internally. Like I'm not going to go around sharing them, but it is helpful for me to know that I can look for specific resources or talk to specific people that I think might understand more, and that's helpful. But those are tools that I'm using, not, ways I'm representing myself in the
Mm,
world. And also, like my dad, I think he's of a different generation, but he never got diagnosed. But I'm pretty certain he has ADHD, and he considers it. He said he never wanted to get tested because it's part of his personality and he thinks a big important part and he doesn't want to medicate it, and I think, he's a big ideas person too. And I think a lot of one ADHD group I was in for a while, so many of them were entrepreneurs. I think that's a really common thing. It's like they're idea people. So they come up with ideas, and a lot of times they have to have other people operationalize those ideas in a lot of ways. But
mhm.
um, yeah. So I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of forgot what your question was, but
But that's the ADHD superpower,
yeah,
right? It's like idea generation and like
definitely.
entrepreneurship, but
Yeah.
then the executive management is the piece where
Yeah.
sort of help. But I would say that you're very focused on yourself and your own kind of tendencies. Did you always understand yourself like this? Or was this a kind of post-diagnosis, or was this a graduate school kind of thing? Because you know yourself really well and you compensate really well. You know what you need. When did this come about? Probably not at 5.
No. But I do think, like I said, in high school, I think I had a pretty good idea this was going on. And um it's kind of like a lot of life stuff, like day-to-day things I put off. So I didn't, this doctor shut it down and I didn't follow up on it for years. I just left it alone. And so finally it was kind of like this checklist item, like I've got to go figure out how to get this checked because at this point I'm at a level in school where, it would be helpful to have more tools. So,
Hmm.
um, what were you asking? I
So
was that
schooling, yeah,
yeah.
I was just wondering when all this kind of gelled,
When yeah.
but really it was
Yeah.
the higher ed that pushed you to understand it better.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think I've always been very curious about my own brain and other brains, and I had learned a lot about it before that. But I think yeah, it kind of maybe focused that investigation more because I knew what to look for specifically, or to get to the point.
It wasn't a coming out moment. It wasn't like, oh, that's the thing.
No,
It
it
was
really
more,
felt like a checklist item. Like, okay, I finally did that. I knew that's how it, when I went through the ADHD testing, and it's like 2 days of testing. And she said the point is y- they're trying to bore your mind into like getting information out of, how you deal with that kind of boredom. And so it was a lot of testing. And at the end, she said, yep, you definitely have ADHD. Like she was just itching to tell me the whole time because
right.
she just had to wait until the end of it. But she said it was really pretty clear. And I think I knew. I just had to check off that diagnosis, I guess.
You'd already been managing.
Hmm.
You'd already
Hmm.
been like introspecting, articulating, and
It,
managing. Yeah.
yeah, I just didn't have like the tools like the Adderall or anything like that.
So my last question is, if I wasn't asking you a million questions and you just got to talk to this class, this like first class on neurodivergence at Rutgers, what would you want them to come away thinking, understanding, changing, or even critiquing?
I don't know. I guess I think like maybe say like you fall in there somewhere. We all have things. We all have something. I don't I don't know. I guess I would maybe challenge people to think of neurodivergence more as like a spectrum where we are all kind of falling into it. Like we all just think differently. And it's very important to try and understand those different ways of thinking because it makes it so much easier to communicate with people and work with people and coexist with people if you try to understand them better and not assume that people are thinking the same way that you are, which is really hard to do.
But it's
But
transforming the social
mhm,
possibilities
yeah,
is kind
I
of
think
what the goal is.
absolutely.
A
Yep.
lot of the students have admitted that they are neurodivergent themselves, and part of the impetus is to study and understand. And then there's like another big contingency that's education oriented or advocacy oriented. But the more I've talked to the education people, a lot of them are in the field because they feel a connection to neurodivergence or
Yeah.
that they are, yeah. So like even the one, like I had separated the neurodivergence from the teacher and like aide sort of interviews, but they wound up being sort of one pool or one kind of community, which is kind of fun, kind of cool. There's a lot of education people in this class. Yeah, so and it's grown to like I think it's like 23 to 25 at this point. There's a lot of interest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's fantastic. And I think this is such a great idea for a class. I mean, it's so easy to just examine books in isolation and the characters in isolation. And I love that you're going out there and collecting experiences as well and thinking about them in that context, those characters in that context and the comparison. And I think that's really great. That's an excellent
It's kind of
idea.
scary for an English teacher because we're really used to a specific
Yeah,
kind of assessment. And
right.
yeah, I do feel a little like I'm throwing words to the wolves or whatever. But I think the upshot will be really good. And the students are actually going to do podcasts
Yeah.
on their own in the end. So I thought sort of if I modeled some conversational knowledge, they would have some tools. I put them in groups of three so that if people drop or whatever, there's still like a, kind of
Mhm.
coherent group, but they'll be doing the same thing. And hopefully the knowledge, what I'm hoping is the knowledge that emerges is not just like reading and reflecting, but that there's a whole kind of conversation of these points
Mhm.
of view that has to kind of happen for anything to progress. So thank you
Sure.
so much for doing this
Totally.
and for joining us and sharing. I'm sure like it's a little weird to have to talk about your learning style. But thank you so much. And I'm gonna end the recording and then just chat for a minute if that's okay. Hopefully I will hit the right button this time. Last time I kept hitting end meeting instead of record. So let me just hit stop recording.